The spaceport of Arceus Station was a chaotic hive of activity, a sprawling network of docking bays and market stalls where every species in the quadrant seemed to converge. Neon signs flickered overhead, their alien glyphs flashing offers for weapons, black market tech, and illicit substances. Merchants barked deals in half a dozen languages, their voices a discordant symphony. Beneath the relentless clamor, Ilara Jensen moved like a shadow. She kept her hood low, eyes downcast, as she slipped through the crowd. At 16, she was lean but wiry, her steps purposeful yet unhurried. The backpack slung over her shoulder held little more than rations, a comm tablet, and a sleek, unmarked knife. Despite her youth, her expression was calm, almost cold, the look of someone who had seen too much too soon. A sleek, silver shuttle loomed ahead, its boarding ramp extending toward the hangar floor. The name Vesper 1 glinted on its hull. Ilara exhaled slowly. Just a few more steps and she'd be aboard, on her way back to Colony Tetra. Back to safety. But fate had other plans. A thick, meaty hand clamped down on her shoulder. The grip was vice-like, unyielding. Ilara's muscles tensed, her fingers twitching toward the knife, but the hand yanked her back hard, spinning her around. "Where do you think you're going, little mouse?" The voice was a gravelly purr, thick with the rasp of a heavy smoker. Krellin towered over her, his reptilian eyes glinting beneath the brim of his hat. His scaled skin was a sickly green, patches of it mottled with scar tissue. Around him stood 4 more slavers, mercenaries of various species, each as imposing and cruel-eyed as their leader. Ilara's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Krellin's tongue flicked over sharp, yellowed teeth. A human girl, all alone in a place like this? Either you're very brave or very stupid. "I'm neither," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Let go." The mercenaries exchanged glances, and one of them, a hulking Brachian with tusks the size of daggers, let out a snort. "Feisty, isn't she?" Krellin's grip tightened, his claws digging into her shoulder. "You'll fetch a good price in the outer rings," he said, leaning in close. "Humans are rare out there. Exotic. The kind of delicacy the right buyers will pay handsomely for." Ilara met his gaze, her eyes icy. "You have no idea what you're doing." Krellin's grin widened, but before he could respond, another mercenary stepped forward, a wiry, pale-skinned alien with black, bulbous eyes. "Krellin," he muttered, his voice a nervous hiss. "Security patrols coming." Krellin cursed under his breath. "Fine. Let's move." Before Ilara could draw a breath, a cloth was clamped over her mouth. The scent was sickly sweet, a numbing, chemical fog that blurred her vision and dulled her thoughts. She thrashed, elbows flying, but the world was already slipping away, the lights of the spaceport dimming into darkness. When Ilara woke, the air was stale and cold. Metal walls loomed around her, slick with condensation. The floor was hard, unforgiving against her spine. Chains clinked as she moved, and pain shot through her wrists. Cuffs, heavy, magnetic, and unbreakable. She forced her eyes open, fighting the lingering fog in her mind. Around her, other captives stirred. A half-dozen of them, huddled together in the dim light. An Ivorian child with silver wings, a grizzled human miner, a Sarthan woman clutching a blood-soaked bandage against her side. Their eyes were hollow, resigned. A Brachian guard stood by the door, his tusks glinting as he chewed on a strip of dried meat. Ilara's gaze darted around the room, taking in every detail. The single, flickering overhead light, the rusted ventilation grate in the ceiling, the sharp edges of the guard's blade. She swallowed, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Stay calm. Stay focused. A low hum vibrated through the ship, and the floor shuddered beneath them. The engines. They were in motion. "Hey!" the miner muttered, his voice hoarse. "Where are they taking us?" "Does it matter?" the Sarthan woman rasped. "Wherever it is, we're already dead." Ilara's jaw clenched. "No," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "We're not." The guard's head snapped up, black eyes fixing on her. "Shut up." Ilara met his gaze, unflinching. "Where's Krellin?" The Brachian's lips curled into a sneer. You want a private audience with the boss? Maybe he'll oblige. If you beg. Ilara said nothing, but inside, her mind churned. Krellin was the key. He was the one who had grabbed her. The one who thought she was just another human girl, a worthless prize in a galaxy full of stronger, more dangerous prey. But he was wrong. The door slid open with a hiss, and Krellin strode in, flanked by the wiry, bug-eyed alien. Krellin's boots clanged against the metal floor as he moved, his massive frame blocking out the light. He stopped in front of Ilara, arms folded. "You're awake," he said. "Good." Ilara lifted her chin, staring up at him. "Where are you taking us?" Krellin chuckled, glancing at his lieutenant. "Hear that, Zorath? Little Mouse thinks she's in charge." Zoratha's dark eyes flicked to Ilara, then away. Beneath his smug expression, there was a flicker of unease, as if he recognized something in her face. Krellin crouched, his clawed hand reaching out to grip Ilara's chin. "I've dealt with your kind before," he said, his breath hot and foul against her face. "Humans always think they're special. But out here, you're just meat, and meat gets sold." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "You really have no idea what you're doing." Krellin's grin faltered. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. And soon you will too." He straightened, nodding to Zorath. "Keep her restrained. If she gets mouthy, gag her." Zorath nodded, but his gaze lingered on Ilara, eyes narrowing. Krellin didn't notice. He was already striding away, barking orders to the crew. The door slid shut behind him, sealing with a heavy thunk. Zorath crouched beside Ilara, his face close. "What's your name?" Ilara met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Ilara." Zoratha's eyes searched hers, his brow furrowing. "And your last name?" Ilara's lips twitched. "Why? You planning to write me a letter?" Zoratha's jaw tightened. "Answer the question." Ilara leaned back against the wall, her expression shifting from defiance to something colder, something sharper. "Jensen," she said, her voice ablade. "Ilara Jensen." Zoratha's face went pale. He swallowed, his throat bobbing as he straightened, stepping back. "Jensen," he muttered under his breath, the word like a curse. Ilara watched him, her eyes glittering. "Now you understand." Zorath said nothing. He turned sharply and strode from the room, his boots echoing down the corridor. The other captives watched him go, their eyes wide and fearful. Ilara leaned her head back against the wall, exhaling slowly. Krellin thought he'd taken a helpless human girl, a prize to be sold, a body to be broken. But he was wrong. Because Ilara Jensen wasn't just a girl. She was the daughter of General Eric Jensen, the most feared man in the galaxy. And when he found out where she was, there would be no escape. Not for Krellin. Not for Zorath. Not for any of them. The ship's engine thrummed with a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through the metal walls of the holding cell. The air was thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and the metallic tang of old blood. Ilara sat with her back against the cold, rusted wall, her wrists still bound in magnetic cuffs. Around her, the other captives huddled in silence, eyes hollow, movements slow and mechanical. A Sarthan woman leaned against the opposite wall, her green skin marred by a fresh bruise that darkened one cheek. Beside her, a Brachian child clung to her arm, eyes wide and haunted. Ilara forced herself to keep her breathing even, her mind working through the steps, replaying the abduction over and over, searching for a gap, a weakness. The door slid open with a sharp hiss, and Zorath stepped inside. His dark, bulbous eyes swept over the captives, but they lingered on Ilara for a fraction too long. Behind him, the Brachian guard followed, a heavy blaster slung across his chest. "Everyone up," Zorath snapped, voice sharp and biting. "Food rations. Line up." The prisoners shuffled to their feet, their movements slow and defeated. Ilara remained seated, her gaze fixed on Zorath. He pretended not to notice her, directing the captives to form a line as the Brachian tossed nutrient bars into their hands without looking. When the last captive had been served, Zorath moved to the door, pausing just long enough to give Ilara a hard, searching look. Then he was gone, the door sliding shut with a heavy clang. Ilara waited. She counted her breaths, slowing them, steadying herself. Then she pushed herself to her feet and crossed the room to the Sarthan woman, whose hands trembled as she unwrapped her ration bar. "You okay?" Ilara asked, her voice low. The Sarthan's eyes flicked up, and for a moment, a flicker of defiance shone through the weariness. "Does it matter?" "It might," Ilara said, glancing at the door. "Have you seen how many guards there are?" The woman snorted softly. "Enough to make sure we don't get any ideas." "And Zorath?" The Sarthan's expression darkened. "He's Krellin's second, the brains behind the operation. But he's more afraid of Krellin than he is of us." Ilara nodded, filing the information away. "What's your name?" "Leora." The Sarthan glanced at the child beside her, who clutched the ration bar like it was a lifeline. "And this is Korik." Ilara knelt beside the child, her expression softening. "Hey, Korik," she said, keeping her tone light. "Do you know how long we've been here?" Korik shook his head, his dark eyes fixed on the floor. "Feels like hours," Leora muttered. "But time doesn't mean much in a place like this." Ilara leaned back against the wall, eyes narrowing. Hours. Long enough for her father to realize she was missing. Long enough for the Jensens to start looking. If they hadn't already. A distant thud echoed through the ship, the floor vibrating beneath them. The lights flickered, then steadied. The other captives barely reacted, their expressions dull, lifeless. But Ilara remained alert, eyes fixed on the door. Then, it opened again. This time, it was Krellin. He strode inside, his massive frame filling the doorway. His gaze swept over the captives, but his eyes found Ilara instantly. "Get up," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Ilara stood, her posture straight, shoulders back. She met Krellin's eyes with a calm, level stare. Krellin's jaw worked, muscles flexing beneath scaly skin. He jerked his chin toward the door. "You. With me." Ilara stepped forward, forcing herself to maintain an even pace. As she passed Leora, she felt the Sarthan's eyes on her, sharp and watchful. Krellin led her down a narrow corridor, its walls lined with exposed wires and flickering lights. The ship was old, patched together with mismatched parts and shoddy repairs. The scent of burnt circuits and stale air filled her nostrils. They reached the bridge, a cramped, circular room crowded with control panels and flickering monitors. Zorath stood by the main console, his eyes fixed on a holographic screen displaying a rotating planet. Beside him, a comm system blinked with a flashing red icon. Krellin shoved Ilara into a metal chair, her wrists still bound. He loomed over her, his yellow eyes narrowed to slits. "Jensen," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "That your real name?" Ilara said nothing. Krellin leaned closer, his breath hot and foul against her face. "Because I just got a very interesting transmission," he said. "Seems like there's a bounty out for a girl named Jensen. And not just any Jensen." Zorath glanced over, his expression tight. "You need to listen to this, Krellin." Krellin straightened, his attention snapping to the console. Zorath pressed a button, and a voice echoed through the bridge, flat and mechanical, a recorded transmission. "This is General Eric Jensen of the Terran Dominion. My daughter, Ilara Jensen, was taken from Arsis Station. Whoever is holding her, listen closely. You have exactly 12 hours to return her unharmed. Fail to comply, and I will burn every slaver ship in this quadrant to the ground." The transmission ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. Krellin's expression was a mixture of shock and disbelief. He turned to Zorath, eyes wide. "General Jensen?" Zorath swallowed, his fingers drumming nervously against the console. "I told you. The Jensens are connected. Militarily. Politically. You don't just take one of their own and walk away." Krellin's jaw clenched. "It's a bluff." "Is it?" Ilara said, her voice icy. My father doesn't bluff. Krellin's head snapped around, his eyes blazing. Shut up. Ilara smirked, her expression unyielding. You think you're in control here, Krellin? You're not. My father will find you. And when he does, you'll wish you were dead. Krellin's hand shot out, grabbing her by the collar and yanking her to her feet. You think you're so special, don't you? He snarled. Just another spoiled little Terran brat who thinks the galaxy owes her something. Ilara's face remained impassive. You have no idea who I am. Krellin's eyes blazed, and for a moment, Ilara thought he would strike her. But then Zorath stepped forward, his voice urgent. Krellin, we have a bigger problem. Krellin released Ilara, his breathing heavy. What now? Zorath pointed to the holographic map. We're being tracked. Someone just pinged our coordinates. And they're closing in fast. Krellin's eyes narrowed. Who? Zorath pressed a series of buttons, and a new image appeared, a sleek, black ship slicing through space, its engines flaring with blue-white energy. The emblem emblazoned on its side was unmistakable, a snarling wolf, jaws open, teeth bared. The Hounds. Krellin's face went pale. The Hounds. Zorath nodded grimly. Jensen's personal strike team. Ilara's lips curled into a smile. Told you, she said softly. Krellin's expression twisted with rage and desperation. Get her to the hold. Lock her down. We're not going down without a fight. Zorath hesitated, his eyes darting between Ilara and Krellin. If the Hounds are here, we're already dead. Krellin's jaw clenched, his fists shaking. Not yet. He turned to Ilara, his eyes dark and wild. You just cost me everything, girl. And when this is over, I'll make you pay for it. Ilara met his glare, her eyes cold and unyielding. You'll never get the chance. Krellin stormed out, barking orders to his crew. Zorath lingered, his expression conflicted. Then, without a word, he shoved Ilara toward the door, the weight of her last name hanging heavy in the air. As they moved down the corridor, the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and distant explosions echoed through the hull. The Hounds were here, and the hunt had just begun. The Hounds moved like phantoms through the dimly lit corridors of the ship, their black combat suits absorbing every shadow, every flicker of light. Each step was soundless, each movement precise. Their leader, Commander Lyle Rourke, raised a fist, signaling a halt. The squad froze, weapons trained on every possible entry point. In the eerie silence, the only sound was the distant hum of the ship's failing engines. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and scorched metal, the remnants of their initial assault. Rourke activated his comm, his voice a low, gravelly murmur. Strike Team Alpha. Position secured. Report. A second later, a woman's voice crackled through the earpiece. Lieutenant Mira Chen, the team's communications specialist. Bravo team has control of the engine room. Minimal resistance. Krellin's forces are disorganized and retreating. Rourke's lips twitched in a grim approximation of a smile. Copy that. Maintain control. We're moving forward. The Hounds advanced, their black helmets glinting under the emergency lights. Each helmet bore the insignia of a snarling wolf, jaws open, teeth bared, the symbol of General Jensen's personal strike team, the most feared unit in the Terran Dominion. At the rear of the formation, General Eric Jensen strode forward, his face set in stone. Clad in the same black combat suit as his men, he looked more wolf than man, silver streaks cutting through his dark hair, eyes hard and cold as frozen steel. His jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched beneath his stubbled skin. Ahead of him, Rourke signaled another stop, his hand lifting in the darkness. Jensen's eyes flicked to the closed door just ahead, the primary cargo hold, where the captives were being kept. The last known location of his daughter. Rourke's gaze met Jensen's. Thermal scans show multiple life signatures inside. At least 12. Some are restrained, but not all. Jensen's jaw tightened. Krellin. No visual confirmation, sir, Rourke said. But he's here. He has to be. Jensen's hand flexed around the grip of his plasma pistol. The weapon hummed softly, charged and ready. The rage simmering in his eyes was barely contained, a storm held back by sheer force of will. "Open it," he said, his voice flat and cold. Rourke nodded. He stepped forward, placing a small explosive charge against the door. The hounds took position, weapons aimed, shoulders squared. 3 seconds. 2, 1. The door blew inward with a deafening roar, smoke and debris spilling into the corridor. The hounds surged forward, weapons sweeping the room. Screams echoed through the smoky air, some terrified, some defiant. Jensen was the first through the breach. His eyes scanned the hold, taking in the huddled captives, the disoriented guards. And there, in the far corner, Ilara. She was on her knees, hands still bound, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. A Sarthan woman knelt beside her, cradling a crying Brachian child. Ilara's eyes met Jensen's, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. "Dad," she whispered. Before Jensen could take a step toward her, a plasma bolt sizzled through the air, narrowly missing his head. He ducked, pivoting sharply to the left. Krellin stood near the rear exit, plasma rifle aimed and smoking. His reptilian eyes blazed with desperation, his teeth bared in a savage snarl. "Back off, Jensen!" Krellin roared, dragging a disheveled, bleeding Zorath in front of him like a human shield. Zorath's eyes were wild, panic-stricken. "Krellin," Jensen said, his voice dangerously calm. "Let my daughter go." Krellin's claws dug into Zorath's shoulder, drawing fresh blood. "You think you can storm in here and take her back? You think your reputation means anything out here? This is my ship." Jensen's eyes narrowed. Not for long. A movement to his right. Ilara was rising to her feet, her wrists still bound but her expression fierce. Leora, the Sarthan woman, gripped her arm, eyes pleading. "Stay down," she hissed. But Ilara shook her off, taking a single, deliberate step forward. "Krellin," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You know who I am now, don't you?" Krellin's gaze snapped to her, eyes wide and unblinking. You're nothing." Ilara's lips curved in a cold, humorless smile. "Wrong. I'm the one thing you should have never touched." Jensen's heart twisted painfully in his chest, but he forced himself to stay focused. Rourke edged closer, plasma rifle aimed squarely at Krellin's head. But the slaver kept Zorath firmly between them, claws pressing into his hostage's neck. "You want to play hero, Jensen?" Krellin sneered. "Go ahead. But your daughter's coming with me." Jensen's eyes locked onto Ilara's. Despite the filth and the bruises, she stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes fierce. Just like her mother had once stood, unbreakable, indomitable. "Rourke," Jensen said softly. Rourke nodded, adjusting his aim. A silent signal passed between them, a language of years spent in battle together. The hounds tightened their formation, moving in like wolves circling wounded prey. Krellin's hand trembled, the muzzle of his plasma rifle wavering. "Stay back!" he barked, his voice cracking. Zorath whimpered, his knees buckling. "Please, Krellin, let me go." Ilara's gaze never left her father's. She raised her bound wrists, meeting Jensen's eyes with a look that was pure steel. "Do it," she said. Jensen nodded once. "Rourke, now." Rourke's plasma rifle fired in a single precise burst. The bolt sizzled through the air, striking Krellin in the shoulder. The slaver howled, dropping the rifle as the blast spun him sideways. Zorath staggered forward, clutching his bleeding arm, and collapsed to the floor. Jensen was already moving. He crossed the distance in 2 long strides, grabbing Krellin by the throat and slamming him against the bulkhead. Krellin gasped, his eyes bulging as Jensen's grip tightened. "You think you can take my daughter?" Jensen growled, his voice low and deadly. "You think you can touch what's mine and walk away?" Krellin's claws scrabbled at Jensen's arm, but the general's grip only tightened, his jaw clenched with fury. "You're done," Jensen said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You're over." Dad. Jensen's eyes snapped to Alara, who had stumbled forward, her face pale. It's over, she said, her voice thick. Let him go. For a moment, Jensen's expression was blank, his eyes dark and haunted. Then, with a low growl, he released Krellin, letting the slaver crumple to the floor, gasping and heaving. Jensen dropped to his knees in front of Alara, his hands reaching out but stopping just short of touching her. Alara, he said, his voice cracking. Are you hurt? Alara shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm fine. Jensen's hands trembled as he gently grasped her wrists, his fingers brushing over the bruises from the cuffs. I'm here, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here. Rourke's voice crackled through the comms. Bravo team, report. We have Krellin. Repeat, we have Krellin. Jensen didn't respond. He couldn't. His entire world had narrowed to the girl in his arms, the daughter he had almost lost. But somewhere behind him, Krellin stirred, a dark shadow slinking toward the plasma rifle on the floor. And as Jensen held Alara close, oblivious to the slaver's desperate, blood-soaked grin, the real danger crept closer. And the battle wasn't over yet. Krellin's hand closed around the plasma rifle, his fingers slick with blood but steady. The world around him blurred, every sound muffled by the roar of rage in his ears. They thought they had him, thought they'd taken everything. But he still had one shot left. General Jensen's back was turned, his arms wrapped tightly around Alara as he whispered reassurances against her hair. The rest of the hounds were busy securing the captives, their weapons lowered. Rourke stood nearby, issuing commands through his comm, unaware of the imminent danger. Krellin bared his teeth, his reptilian eyes narrowing to slits. His shoulders shook with pain, his wounded arm throbbing with every heartbeat, but he forced himself to steady his aim. One shot. That was all it would take. One shot, and he could still make Jensen pay. Alara's eyes snapped open. Krellin squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt roared through the air, sizzling with deadly energy. Alara didn't think. She moved. Twisting out of her father's grasp, she shoved Jensen sideways just as the bolt struck. The blast slammed into her shoulder, sending her crashing to the ground, her body skidding across the metal floor. Alara! Jensen roared, his heart plummeting as he scrambled to his feet, reaching for her. But Krellin wasn't done. With a guttural snarl, he staggered to his feet, the rifle shaking in his grip. You think you can take everything from me, Jensen? He howled. You think you can just walk in here and... A single shot echoed through the chamber. Rourke lowered his blaster, smoke curling from the muzzle. Krellin's eyes widened in shock, a dark, smoking hole punched clean through his chest. The rifle slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor as he collapsed to his knees. Blood bubbled from his lips as he struggled to speak. His eyes locked on Jensen. You took everything. Jensen stepped forward, towering over the dying slaver. His expression was carved from stone, every muscle in his jaw clenched. You brought this on yourself, he said, his voice a low, icy rasp. Krellin's mouth opened as if to respond, but no sound emerged. His eyes went blank, and his body crumpled to the floor, lifeless. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute, broken only by the ragged sound of Alara's breathing. Jensen dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering over her wounded shoulder. The plasma bolt had seared through her jacket, leaving the fabric charred and smoking. Her skin was blistered and raw, blood seeping from the edges of the burn. Alara, Jensen said, his voice shaking as he cradled her face with one hand. Stay with me. Alara's eyelids fluttered. Dad, she whispered, her voice strained but steady. I told you. I'm fine. Jensen's eyes burned, and for a moment he couldn't speak. The sight of her lying there, hurt because she had saved him, twisted something deep inside him. Medic! Rourke barked, spinning around to signal the rest of the hounds. We need a medic here now. 2 hounds rushed forward, one carrying a trauma kit. The other gently pressed Jensen aside, kneeling beside Alara to assess the wound. The medic's hands moved swiftly, injecting a coagulant and painkiller into the burn, sealing it with a thin, transparent film. Damage is localized, the medic reported, her voice calm and clinical. No vital organs hit. She'll be okay. Jensen exhaled a shuddering breath, relief flooding through him like a tidal wave. He squeezed Alara's hand, his grip firm and steady. "You're safe now," he said, his voice thick. "It's over." Alara managed a weak smile, her gaze drifting to Krellin's lifeless body. "Good," she murmured. "Couldn't stand the smell of him." Rourke huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh, his shoulders sagging as the tension bled out of him. The rest of the hounds moved through the room, herding the remaining mercenaries into a tight line, binding their wrists with magnetic cuffs. But the danger wasn't over. A low, ominous hum reverberated through the ship, a sound that made Jensen's blood run cold. Rourke's expression hardened as he tapped the comm panel on his wrist. "Chen, report." The comm crackled with static, then Chen's voice came through, tight and urgent. "Sir, we've got a problem. Krellin's systems are rigged with a failsafe. If his heart stops, the ship's self-destruct sequence activates." Jensen's eyes snapped to Krellin's corpse. The slaver's lifeless eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, his face frozen in a rictus of rage. "How much time do we have?" Rourke asked, voice clipped. 5 minutes, Chen said. "Maybe less. We're trying to override, but the system's locked down. We need to evacuate." Jensen clenched his jaw, his mind working furiously. He met Rourke's eyes, his expression fierce. "Get the captives to the extraction point. Priority 1. Rourke nodded, snapping orders to the hounds. "Move. Get them out of here." 2 soldiers moved to lift Alara, but Jensen shook his head. "I've got her," he said, sliding his arms beneath her and lifting her gently. She groaned, her head lolling against his chest. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes fluttering open. "I can walk." "Not a chance," Jensen said, his voice rough but tender. The hounds surged through the corridors, herding the captives ahead of them as alarms blared through the ship. The lights pulsed in time with the klaxon, casting everything in a blood-red glow. The floor trembled beneath their feet as the engines rumbled, the ship tearing itself apart from the inside. Jensen held Alara close, his heart pounding as they rounded the final corner, the docking bay looming ahead. The Hound's transport hovered in the bay, its engines hot and ready. Rourke stood by the ramp, waving them forward. "Go. Move, move." Jensen sprinted up the ramp, Alara clutched to his chest. The last of the captives were herded aboard, and Rourke slapped the control panel, sealing the hatch just as the ship shuddered violently. "Get us out of here." Rourke barked to the pilot. The transport's engines roared, and the ship shot forward, pulling away from Krellin's doomed vessel. Through the viewport, Jensen watched as the slaver ship trembled, its hull buckling under the force of internal detonations. Then, with a blinding flash of white-hot light, the ship imploded, fragments of metal scattering like burning embers against the darkness of space. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Jensen sat back, his head falling against the wall, eyes closed. Alara lay in his lap, her breathing slow and steady. The medic hovered nearby, checking her vitals. Rourke sank onto the bench opposite them, sweat glistening on his brow. "Well," he said, voice rough. "That was close." Jensen opened his eyes, staring down at Alara's face. Despite the pain and exhaustion, she was still awake, her dark eyes fixed on him. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Alara's lips twitched in a tired, lopsided smile. "Better now," she said, her voice a soft rasp. Jensen swallowed hard, his chest tight. "You saved my life back there," he said. "You know that." Alara's eyes glistened. "Guess we're even now." Jensen shook his head, his expression fierce. "Not even close." Rourke cleared his throat, his gaze softening. "Command's waiting for a report, General." Jensen nodded, his gaze never leaving his daughter's face. "Tell them we're bringing everyone home." Rourke stood, giving them a brief nod before striding away. The hum of the engine settled into a low, steady vibration, a lullaby in the aftermath of chaos. Jensen leaned back, closing his eyes, his hands still wrapped protectively around Alara's. And as the transport sped toward the safety of Terran space, he held onto that small, fragile hand as though it were the only thing tethering him to the universe.